All right, guys, today we're shooting a video for you about a visual inspection that turns invasive. We've had some earthquakes in the past, and people are asking, what should I do after an earthquake? How should I assess my building? And so this video is going to be based on any kind of visual inspection, whether it's an earthquake or a storm or something, or just general maintenance. And so we're going to take you through what started as a visual and then it evolved into an invasive because we found water damage. And so we'll take you through how this works. So I'm going to take you through some photos. This is a stucco building. You've got a roof over a garage, and you've got what we call roof scuppers or roof to wall drain pipes that go down to a downspout and drain the upper roof area. And so we're looking at the stucco building, and in the building, just from the street level, so pretending we're standing in the driveway, we can see the shading, this slight shading across the roof to wall, or the roof and ceiling is. And I can zoom it in a little bit. It's kind of tough to see stucco cracks at this level, but there's one. You can see some cracking, and in the next few slides I'll show you some. But first couple things that jump out at me, no head flashings. I'm not seeing any head flashings over the windows. I see trim stuck on the top of stucco. This allows water to get behind the two and get into that system. I don't see any flashings around my vents. These look like they are kind of built into the stucco. So we got the report. Hey, inside I've got some leaks in my garage roof. So here's some stains, some drywall starting to come apart. This is at that interface between the roof to wall in that last picture. And so then here's that same beam that's holding up the main wall. Here's some more leaks coming down. This area is under the sloped roof, but why do I have all this staining on my roof? So we jumped up onto the roof and we pulled off some of the trim, and sure enough, you can see no head flashing, just a bead of sealant or caulk that's left over. But then, you know, they had to nail on the trim, right? So they drove nails through it. Not advisable. Stucco is bumped right up against the window. No good sealant bead. Kind of a suspicious looking transition at the roof to wall. There's not a lot of flashing exposed. The stucco comes down pretty low. Now you can start seeing these cracks, right? So these are visual clues. So here's some cracks. Here's some cracks. Cracky. So around the scupper, lots of cracks, even staining coming through the crack. Lots more cracks here and here and here. So there's a couple different things going on. Why is the stucco cracking so much? And why are there water stains? So let's go to the next. So on the inside, well, come on upstairs. Here's that window. Here's that floor line where the roof takes off down to the thing. Lots of water damage around the window. So when people say, what are visual clues I can look for? Notice the crumbling drywall and the cracking, swelling drywall right at the base corner of the window. This window is nothing more than the hole through the wall, right? So if it's not flashed properly, you're gonna get those ripples and damage. And then obviously your floor. Your base molding is clearly water damaged. Your floorboards are wrinkling and rippling and cupping. So plenty of evidence of water. But wait a minute, this is at a roof to wall where the stains in the ceiling of the garage, kind of above the garage door opener, are kind of down roof slope a little bit. So maybe this isn't a roofer. Maybe this is a wall issue. So let's keep looking. So we went up to one of these vents. I think you remember them back in the couple slides ago. Here you go. We're just poking around a vent. We pull the vent out and we can see the OSB or the wood sheathing right under it. We should be seeing some building paper or some Tyvek or something at least as a weather resistant barrier there, but no. We're seeing the stucco bumped right up against the vent. You can see the stucco right there. It's actually not very thick stucco either. It's a little thin. And you can see a better close-up of the cracks. Here's one that's been undisturbed. You can see it's a clear crack, so if I'm water running down the wall, I can run right in there. Now I'm on the OSB sheathing causing trouble. So water and wood don't get along, right? Here's the scupper box that we've pulled off. So this is the roofing membrane that's coming out into that scupper box. In close inspection, we haven't pulled any stucco off yet. Close inspection, you can see, well, here's some seams. Here's a couple of different colors of sealant that they squirted on there. Definite cracks coming down and around the scupper, and it was cold, so here's some ice. But this doesn't look that great. So let's poke in here and see what's going on. Carefully chip back the stucco. Here's our building paper, and now we can see the water damaged OSB. You can see the rusty nails. You can see the swollen, wet OSB, and it continues down behind the wall. So we're like, well, we need to keep chasing that, see how far down it goes. So let's start pulling off some stucco. Now, this isn't exactly sequential, but we ended up pulling off stucco in this area. Here's your wall scupper. Here's a vent. So we cut around those areas. Here's your black building paper. What I wanted to show you here is one reason the stucco is cracking. You can see this giant piece of stucco is coming off in a big sheet. You're required to have a lot more staples holding this wire mesh on that then holds the heavy plaster onto the wall. When you can take it off in giant sheets like that, and again, looking at the back of this stucco section, I have one staple, maybe a staple. Oh, there's a staple. 1, 2. So there's not a lot of staples holding it. We should see staples every 12 to 16 inches on center. This turns out to be a very heavy panel of stucco that's held on by a few staples. Now that we have a wet substrate in the OSB because the scupper is leaking or the vent's leaking, that OSB is going to be mushy and soft, so it'll lose its effectiveness on holding onto that stucco. So your stucco is beginning to blister off the wall, if you will, or bubble and just fall off the wall. So here's another piece. We're continuing to strip it down. You can see 1 staple, 2 staples, 3, maybe 4. We should see a lot more, and it should not come off in giant sheets like this. It should be a pain to pull off, and it should be in little crumbly rock-sized pieces. Another big sheet of it. You can see stucco is improperly installed, and there's water getting behind it. And this poses a risk of falling off the building, and that can be a safety hazard. So we're continuing to peel it off because it's improperly installed anyway, getting to the damage. Here you go. So we've pulled the stucco off, pulled the building paper off. You're looking at what's supposed to be orange OSB in good shape, and then right below your penetrations, remember these were just stuck into the stucco, and your roof to wall or roof scupper was leaking. All that water is just running down the wall. This water is now behind the building paper. It can run all the way down to the roof intersection and continue into the unit. Remember that stained base we saw, that water running into the unit. Now we have water running out under the roofing, getting into the roof system and causing problems into the garage. So it's not just a garage roof patch, it's now walls, framing damage, all sorts of penetration flashing issues, multiple things going on. So another area, this is under the stucco. We pulled that OSB off, and you can see even the framing is getting wet. Framing is getting wet. They'd blown in insulation, or the cellulose insulation is getting water damaged. This is a messy cavity. We didn't do mold sampling, but that looks kind of organic to me. Other side of that drywall is your bedroom. That's an unhealthy wall. So we continued around to another section of the building, and you can see where we've pulled off stucco. This window is clearly leaking. Water is pouring around the window. Again, the stucco was butted up against the window, missing its sealant joints, missing its metal head flashings. improperly installed. Perhaps the window itself is leaking as well. But you can see water just coming around the window and even running down to the first floor on both sides. Here we pulled off some OSB to check the framing, and you can see water is getting into the framing. All around the nail heads have corroded. This is your subfloor of the second story. This is starting to deteriorate. Your insulation is getting wet and water damaged. When this OSB gets wet, it loses its structural ability, and that turns into problems real quick too. Here's another interesting piece I wanted to mention. Doing some videos on window replacement, and here's a classic example of a second floor window leaking down onto a first floor window. And we all know water runs downhill, and that's fine. Nothing rocket scientry there. But one thing we run into is sometimes the association says residents own their windows, residents are responsible for replacing their windows. So what happens when the second floor unit replaces windows, does it wrong, and the water just drains down onto the first floor windows? And even if their windows are done right, or if they were original windows, it's now causing a whole bunch of damage from second to first floor. And then you get into arguments of who pays for that. And ultimately we hear, I spent $10,000 on new replacement windows. Well, if the installer did it wrong, it's causing even more damage in this situation. So back to stucco, here's what we're talking about. We had lots of issues on this in this project, from improper stucco application to just improper waterproofing around all these penetrations, whether it's roof scuppers, windows, vents, roof to walls. Here's the interior damage that you can be looking for. And all this stuff is visible from the outside. So when we're saying, we have an inspection guide that we'll put a link to in here, but you can walk around and you can see these cracks. You don't have to get all the way up into pulling stucco off. But when you have a lot of cracks, there's a lot of potential things that are going on. So good luck looking at your building, and download those guides. And if you want some help, reach out. Thank you.